All right, strap in everyone, because today we're taking a deep dive into Wrong Turn.
Oh, yeah, you guys definitely went all out on the source material this time.
Seriously, a whole stack of articles and reviews, even some of those best kills lists.
Clearly, you're not just looking for a casual stroll through this franchise.
Right. Our listener wants to go deep, understand what makes Wrong Turn tick.
Yeah, and how it's evolved alongside horror itself. We're talking 7 films.
Spanning from 2003 to 2021, almost 2 decades of, well, cinematic carnage.
That's right. Which is really interesting because it gives us a chance to, well, to really track how the genre has changed.
Like, how did Wrong Turn reflect those changes? Or maybe even influence them?
That's what we're here to figure out. And speaking of change, the reboot's a big one.
Right off the bat, they throw a curveball.
Most franchises, they stick to what works. But Wrong Turn flips the script.
Almost like they're saying, hey, horror fans, you've evolved. So have we.
Exactly. So let's start with the basics, just in case anyone out there.
Took a right turn and missed this whole franchise.
Okay, so what are the core ingredients of a Wrong Turn film?
The original series, at least, has this pretty simple premise.
Cannibalistic deformed mutants lurking in the backwoods of West Virginia.
You're on a road trip, you take a detour, and suddenly...
Your GPS is the least of your worries.
Speaking of GPS, remember that scene in the first one with the map?
Oh yeah, totally covered in blood.
That's like a metaphor, right?
Totally. It's like technology's useless in the face of, well, primal fear.
And that theme of isolation, it runs through the whole franchise.
Absolutely. These characters are cut off, vulnerable, they got to rely on
their instincts, their wits, or else.
Well, become dinner. Right. So let's do a quick rundown of each film just to
set the stage for our deeper dive.
Sounds good. So first up, we've got Wrong Turn, 2003.
Where we meet our original trio of villains, Three Fingers, Sawtooth, and One Eye.
They became instant slasher icons.
Totally. They embody that fear of the rural, the unknown.
In the film itself, it had this gritty, realistic look.
I remember watching it for the first time and thinking, this could actually happen.
Right. You felt like you were right there in the woods with them.
Definitely not a place you want to be. Okay, then we get Wrong Turn 2, Dead End.
2007. More humor, a bigger mutant family.
Oh,
some truly creative kills. You remember that axe scene?
How could I forget? Definitely one for the best of list.
Or maybe the worst of, depending on your stomach.
Right. But what's interesting about Wrong Turn 2 is...
it leans into that B-movie vibe.
It's gorier, more over the top, but it's also winking at the audience.
Like, we know this is ridiculous. Just come along for the ride.
And then we've got Wrong Turn 3, Left 4 Dead.
2009. This one, honestly...
yeah, it didn't quite hit the same.
Agreed. Budget limitations, the CGI, not as strong.
But it does give us more Three Finger.
Who really starts to dominate as the main antagonist?
He becomes the face of Wrong Turn, you could almost say.
Representing that primal, relentless evil. And then in 2011, we get a prequel.
Wrong Turn 4, Bloody Beginnings. Prequels were huge in horror around that time.
Why do you think audiences are drawn to those origin stories? Especially with villains.
I think it's that fascination with the roots of evil.
We want to know, like, what made these monsters? What twisted them?
It makes them more complex, right? Maybe even a little sympathetic.
Yeah. And Wrong Turn 4 being set in that creepy sanatorium.
It plays on those fears of mental institutions, of being trapped.
Where the line between sanity and madness, it's blurred.
Okay, and then it's back to the main timeline with Wrong Turn 5, Bloodlines.
In 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And we meet Maynard, the patriarch of the mutant clan.
This one felt even more over the top than the others.
It definitely leaned into the grotesque, especially with that furnace death.
Oh, yeah, that was rough. But each film tries to do something different, doesn't it?
It does. And Wrong Turn 5 really focuses on the family dynamic.
Like, these mutants aren't just lone wolves. They have this...
twisted sense of community,
No.
Their own traditions.
So it's not just about individual acts of violence. It's about how...
those acts are shaped by the group, by this warped sense of belonging.
And that leads us to the most controversial one, Wrong Turn 6, Last Resort.
2014. Family legacy, inbreeding, consequences of their actions.
It even sparked a real-world lawsuit because they used...
that's a missing person's photo? Yeah, that was the whole thing.
Definitely a reminder that even in fictional horror, there are lines you can't cross.
Absolutely. And then, of course, we have the elephant in the room.
The 2021 Wrong Turn reboot. No more mutant cannibals?
Nope. Instead, we get this secluded society called the Foundation.
Talk about a departure. Like the franchise took a wrong turn itself almost.
But it's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because horror itself was changing.
We were seeing more of those psychological, societal horrors.
Like Midsommar. The other isn't some creature in the woods anymore.
It's us. It's our communities, our beliefs taken to these dangerous extremes.
Exactly. So, did Wrong Turn navigate that turn successfully?
Or did it lose its way in the process? We'll debate that later.
But for now, let's talk about the themes that run through this whole bloody franchise.
All right, let's get somatic. So isolation is obviously huge.
Yeah, we've touched on it, but it's more than just a setting. It's a state of being.
These characters are cut off, not just physically, but from civilization.
The rules, the norms, the things that protect us. Gone.
And then there's the violence.
Oh, yeah. Wrong Turn doesn't shy away from the grotesque.
It's not just the amount of blood and guts, it's the creativity.
The way those kills tap into our deepest fears.
Like, look around you right now. Any everyday object.
Could become a weapon in the Wrong Turn universe.
Okay, now I'm feeling a little uneasy about my stapler.
But it's not all doom and gloom. Right. There's also that element of survival.
Some characters use their wits, their resourcefulness to escape.
That glimmer of hope, that reminder that even in the face of horror,
the human will to survive can be powerful.
And I think that's why people connect with Wrong Turn.
It's not just about being scared, it's about seeing characters fight back.
Against these incredible odds. It's inspiring, in a twisted way.
Maybe not inspirational, but definitely entertaining.
Oh, absolutely. And then there's that whole backwoods horror trope.
What is it about those untamed spaces that creeps us out so much?
It's like a regression, right, to our most basic fears.
The fear of the dark, the unknown, the things that go bump in the night.
And Wrong Turn takes us right back to that primal state.
Facing the darkness, both within ourselves and out there in the world.
Okay, before we get to those iconic kills, and we will, don't worry.
Let's talk about the villains themselves. How did they evolve?
From that original trio to the family dynamics and then the Foundation.
Yeah, it's a big shift. Like the original three, they were almost like forces of nature.
Pure brutality.
Yeah.
Scary, but not exactly nuanced.
Right. Like a shark. You know it's going to attack, it's just a matter of how.
But then we see more of their backstories, their relationships.
They become more than just monsters, they become a family.
A very messed up family, but still.
So the horror shifts from external to internal, in a way.
It's not just about being hunted. It's about the darkness within us.
And the Foundation, they take that idea even further.
They're a whole society built on twisted traditions and a warped morality.
It makes you question who the real monsters are, doesn't it?
That's where things get really interesting.
Hold that thought, because that's the perfect place to pause for part one of our deep dive.
We'll be back with part 2 to unpack the reboot debate, those top 10 kills.
And how Wrong Turn reflects our anxieties about the world around us. Stay tuned.
Okay, so that 2021 reboot.
Really shook things up, didn't it?
Like, it's still Wrong Turn, but
it's almost a completely different beast.
It is. The filmmakers took this classic setup, the backwoods setting,
and they flipped it.
Instead of being just a place of danger, the woods are like
a haven for the Foundation.
Exactly. Yeah. This community, they've rejected mainstream society.
It's like they've taken that off-the-grid idea to the extreme.
And the film's asking, what happens when that desire for simplicity turns dark?
When it becomes about exclusion, about control.
Yeah, and that brings us to the big question, doesn't it?
Was the reboot a success? Or did it betray the spirit of Wrong Turn?
I'm curious. What do you think? And what about you, listening at home?
Did you embrace the change? Or did you miss those mutant cannibals?
Because let's be real, the reboot is divisive.
Some people loved it, praised the new direction.
The social commentary, the more psychological horror.
But a lot of longtime fans, they felt let down.
They wanted that over-the-top gore, the familiar villains.
I'll be honest, I was on the fence.
It's a tough one. I appreciate what they were trying to do.
Yeah, like elevate the horror, make it more thought-provoking.
But I did miss that B-movie fun of the originals.
It's like they traded in the guilty pleasures for something.
Ugh, more cerebral. But maybe a little less entertaining.
Maybe. But it's interesting how the reception was split, you know.
Critics generally liked it.
But the fans, they were much more divided.
It's something you see a lot with horror, especially when
tries to push boundaries.
Critics often appreciate the ambition, while audiences
might just want a good scare. And hey, there's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly. But the fact that the reboot sparked so much debate,
it shows how much Wrong Turn resonates with people, even if they
disagree about how it should evolve.
All right, I think it's time for something a little more,
lighthearted.
Yeah, let's dive into the top 10 kills.
We've got a list here. But we want to hear from you, too.
Hit us up on social media. Let us know your favorite wrong turn kills.
Or the ones that made you, turn away from the screen.
Before we get to the top 10, though, some honorable mentions.
Oh, for sure. Like the car crusher from the original Wrong Turn.
Genius use of an everyday object.
And who could forget the meat grinder from Wrong Turn 2?
Makes me never want to eat bologna again.
So, number 10 on our list, the tree impalement from Wrong Turn 4.
Brutal, visually striking, and that snowy setting just adds to it.
It's like disturbingly beautiful,
Number 9, the beheading by piano wire from the original.
Quick, clean, and it shows that anything can be a weapon.
Even something as seemingly harmless as piano wire.
Right. Number 8, the forced cannibalism scene from Wrong Turn 6.
This one's more psychological torture than physical.
But it's so disturbing because it plays on those primal taboos.
It's like the ultimate violation.
And then at number 7, we have the buried alive scene from Wrong Turn 2.
Ugh, the claustrophobia, the helplessness.
The nightmare scenario.
Number 6, the arrow through the head from Wrong Turn 3.
A classic, but effective.
Sometimes you don't need anything fancy.
Nope, just good old-fashioned brutality. Number 5, the double impalement from Wrong Turn 5.
1 spear, 2 victims.
Over-the-top gore at its best.
And now we're entering the top 4, the kills that have become legendary.
Number 4, the decapitation by tripwire from the first film.
This one really set the tone for the whole franchise.
Danger lurking everywhere, you never know what's going to get you.
Number 3, the chainsaw massacre, also from the original Wrong Turn.
Iconic, brutal, the stuff of nightmares.
It's the kill that put Wrong Turn on the map.
All right, down to the top 2. This is where it gets tough.
Number 2, the axe split from Wrong Turn 2.
Quick, brutal, you can't look away.
And the number 1 Wrong Turn kill.
The decapitation by truck from the original edition.
Suspense, gore, that unforgettable shot of the head rolling.
It's a classic for a reason.
It perfectly captures that raw terror that Wrong Turn is known for.
So we've talked about the kills, the themes.
But what about the bigger picture? Why does Wrong Turn still resonate?
I think part of it is the simplicity,
It taps into those basic fears.
The fear of the unknown, of being hunted, of losing our humanity.
Like a campfire story come to life.
Exactly. And it reminds us that even in the modern world, there are still
dark corners where our nightmares can become reality.
But it's also fun, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's that B-movie energy, the over-the-topness.
It doesn't take itself too seriously, which makes it enjoyable to watch.
Even if you're covering your eyes half the time.
But beyond all that, I think Wrong Turn reflects something about society.
Our anxieties about the world, about each other.
A fear of rural isolation, the dangers of blind tradition.
And the reboot, it takes that a step further.
For the foundation, it's commenting on groupthink, extremism.
The potential for any community to turn inward and become dangerous.
It's a reminder that sometimes the real monsters
aren't the ones hiding in the shadows, but the ones right in front of us.
Okay, that got a little dark.
Yeah, maybe a little too real for a minute there. But before we wrap up part 2,
I have a question for you listening at home.
If you could direct the next Wrong Turn, what would you do?
Would you go back to basics or continue exploring these deeper themes?
It's a tough choice, but the possibilities are exciting, aren't they?
They are. The future of the franchise. Who knows what it holds?
Well, for now, it's time to take a break, grab some snacks.
Maybe skip the bologna.
And we'll be back with part 3 to wrap up our deep dive into the world of Wrong Turn.
Okay, so we're back for the final leg of our Wrong Turn journey. It's been a wild ride, hasn't it?
Yeah, we've gone from those blood-soaked backwoods to
the even more disturbing depths of human nature.
It's amazing how much there is to unpack with this franchise,
Seriously, 7 films, a reboot, all those kills. But hey, that's what makes these deep dives so much fun.
Right, taking all this information and figuring out what it all means.
So before we wrap things up, let's do a quick recap for our listener.
What are the key takeaways from our Wrong Turn exploration?
Well, first off, you can't talk about this franchise without talking about the setting.
The isolation, the rural landscapes, they're more than just backdrops.
They represent that fear of the unknown, the places where
civilization ends and anything can happen.
And then, of course, you've got those iconic villains.
The mutant cannibals, those gruesome embodiments of our darkest fears.
They're brutal, but they also reflect that fascination we have with the other.
The things that exist outside the boundaries of what we consider normal.
And that fascination takes a really interesting turn in the reboot, right?
Yeah, at the foundation. Suddenly, the source of horror isn't
deformed creature. It's this seemingly civilized community
Like the film is saying, hey, the real monsters might be the ones.
who look and act just like us.
It's a pretty unsettling thought, isn't it?
It is. And it speaks to how horror itself is evolving, you know.
We're not just scared of things that go bump in the night anymore.
We're scared of the darkness within ourselves, within society.
And Wrong Turn, it's always been about pushing those boundaries, challenging our expectations of what horror can be.
And the reboot, whether you liked it or not.
It definitely took that challenge to a whole new level.
It did. And that's why I think this franchise continues to fascinate us.
It's not just about the blood and guts, although there's plenty of that.
It's about how those visceral thrills connect to something deeper.
Something that reflects our anxieties, our fears about the world around us. So where does Wrong Turn go from here? 7 films, a reboot.
Is there anything left to explore?
That's a good question. I mean, the franchise has proven it can reinvent itself.
But there's also something to be said for, going back to basics.
Maybe a combination of both. The classic backwoods horror.
Mixed with that more nuanced social commentary approach of the reboot.
A wrong turn that makes you scream and think at the same time.
Now that would be something. But ultimately, it's up to the filmmakers.
And I think it's safe to say we'll all be watching to see
what wrong turns they take us on next. But for now,
we've reached the end of our deep dive. It's been a twisted journey, hasn't it?
It has. We've explored those gruesome kills, the disturbing themes.
And hopefully we've given you, our listener, a new perspective on this franchise.
A deeper understanding of what makes Wrong Turn so Wrong Turn.
And maybe even a newfound appreciation for its unique brand of horror.
Exactly. But as always, we encourage you to keep exploring on your own.
Revisit the films, check out the fan communities, share your thoughts.
Because horror is a genre that thrives on discussion and debate.
So keep those conversations going. And if you ever find yourself lost in the woods,
remember the lessons of Wrong Turn. Stick to the main road. Trust your instincts.
And maybe, just maybe, you'll avoid becoming the next victim.
Until next time, stay curious, stay safe.
And thanks for taking this deep dive with us.